Right, hello everybody again. Here we go. We're looking forward to GCSE Sociology Paper 2 coming up fairly shortly. So I'm going to do a walkthrough of the previous year's Paper 2, which will be the 2022 Eduqas GCSE Sociology Paper. So I'm hoping that with this, what it's going to help you do is just be familiar with the paper, know roughly the kind of things you're going to be asked. But of course, this is last year's stuff, so I would not expect any of these questions to appear on this year's paper, but hopefully this will just give you an idea of what we're looking at. So a bit of a different vibe to what I normally do. You're now going to see, hopefully on the screen, you'll be able to see the paper 2 from last year. So we've got 10th of June 2022. This is what the people last year sat as part of their GCSE sociology course. What I'm going to do is just going to take you through the front cover as well, so you're going to have to put your name, surname first and your first name, then your centre number, then your candidate number. Your college or school will provide you that. Let's just have a quick look down at what we've got in terms of what we've actually got here. So we've got an hour and 45 minutes. That basically amounts to 105 minutes, and you get 100 marks. So basically assume it's basically like a mark a minute. But on that note, there are some questions that you're going to want to spend a little less time on, and there's going to be some questions that you might want to spend a little more time on. But generally speaking, we're thinking here about a mark a minute being the way that you want to approach this. Now, just looking down at these sections here, there's clearly one section which has got 30 marks. It's the highest scoring section of this paper. So that's your crime and deviance section, section 6. But also sections 3, 4, and 5, they are purely on stratification. So actually, I can't do the maths there, but we've got, what's that, 34, 49 marks, is that right? So nearly half of your paper is made up of strat diff as well. So just be aware of what sort of things, what topics are on this paper. It's basically stratification and crime and some applied research methods. So let's get into the actual paper itself and have a look at the first question. Now, as I did with my previous paper on paper 1, I've gone through and basically, like, I've got the copy of the damn thing here and I've written my own notes on it. So I've actually gone through, and you might be able to see that there, you maybe not. Don't know. I've written my answers to these questions. So it's just there to remind me like how I would go about it. Now, first question should be nice and easy. You get a bunch of different sentences there. So, and all you've got to do is use the words that you're given to fill the spaces in. So you get more words than there are spaces. So A is a term which means efforts are made to ensure all groups feel part of society. Presumably that's going to be your social inclusion. A sociologist who studied female crime. If you've watched my previous videos on theories of crime and patterns of crime, you'll know that's Pat Carlin or Carlin. A term used to describe the crime committed by middle-class people. That would be your white-collar crime. And then a term used to describe a process where a group is unfairly blamed for society's problems. That will be a scapegoat. So hopefully, nice, easy 4 marks to start you off. Now, question 2, I will need to go through this a little bit with you guys. So question 2 asks you to look at the following information and answer the question that follows. You've given a table there of top jobs in Britain between the years of 2014 and 2019. And what you have to do here, it says these are all the people who either have got these jobs and who attended independent schools, which is either a private school or a public school in 2014, or attended independent schools in 2019. Now, what you've got to do with this is it's basically about what I call data interpretation. So the first question you've got here says, identify the job with the highest percentage who achieved, highest percentage who attended independent schools in 2019. Now, if you look at the table, you should be able to work out, we're only looking at the 2019 column here. So we look at the highest number there, that's senior judges. So it's senior judges for A, and then identify the job with the lowest percentage who attended independent schools in 2019. Look at the lowest number here, that would be footballers. So you write senior judges for A and footballers for B. Now, it starts to get a little bit more complicated when you get these 4-mark questions here, because it asks you to describe 2 patterns or trends shown in that table, supporting your answer with reference to statistics in the table. So what you've got to do is look at this data and you've got to identify 2 trends that are going on there. Now, the other thing you need to do is when you make sure you've identified the trends, you need to support that with evidence, i.e. statistics from this table. So if the question is, I ask you to describe 2 patterns or trends supported with reference to statistics in the table, the first thing you're probably going to be talking about here is that the people who went to independent schools are more likely to get these top jobs. Okay, so we look at the top jobs there, the numbers of people are very, very high given that only 7% of the general population attend independent schools in Britain. So if this was proportional, we should expect to see 7% all the way through this. But the only one that's anywhere close to that is footballers. So you're going to say something like, one trend is that people who went to independent schools are more likely to be in the top jobs. That you get 1 mark for. You then need to give some statistics from this table to explain it. So you're going to say something like, for example, despite making up only 7% of the population, 71% of judges in 2014 had been to independent schools. That's me using that figure there of 71% for our senior judges. Now, my second pattern or trend is going to be looking at the ways in which between 2014 to 2019, the vast majority, I think all of these actually drop down. So my second trend is going to be that the percentage of people in top jobs who had been to independent schools fell between 2014 and 2019. All I've got to do now that get marked for that is now give an example or give some statistics from the table to back that up. So I might say that, for example, in 2014, 62% of armed forces officers have been to independent schools, but in 2019, that had dropped to 49%. So you have to use the statistics from that table in order to get you anywhere close to 4 out of 4 for that. So let's have a look at question number 3. So question 3 is a 2-marker. With 2 markers, the way you get both marks is you give the answer and then you develop it. Your development can be any extra information or an example. So here you're asked, define what is meant by status. Status is basically about how important a person is or how important a person is seen to be in society. That will get you a mark. You need to bring something else into this. So you could talk anything about the fact that there is ways you can gain status, achieve status, ascribe status. If you want to be really fancy, throw a bit of Weber in there and talk about his view of status being just one part of class power and status of someone's socioeconomic group. The other thing you can do, for instance, is make the easy link that status is often linked to the job that you do, and that will get you 2 marks. So explain 2 reasons why people might or may get the most important jobs in society. With this one, I would encourage you to go back and have a look at 3 episodes that I've done previously. So episode 13, episode 15, and episode 16 that will basically cover off why some people get the best jobs in society and others don't. Now, if this was me going for this, what I would basically do for this is I would talk about one reason being the functionalist explanation. It's the people who get the most important jobs in society are people who work the hardest. This is due to society being a meritocracy. And if you work hard at something, this might link into Davis and Moore's role allocation. The other thing I think you might want to mention here as well is not only just hard work as a reason why people get the most important jobs, but is potentially looking at some of the reasons why people don't get the most important jobs. So that could link into anything relating to discrimination or prejudice, relating to inequality of opportunity. So it might be a reason why men get better jobs than women, the glass ceiling perhaps. It might be due to institutional racism, why white people get better jobs than ethnic minorities. Anything you can throw in there, I would definitely put in one reason as working hard and the functionalist view, Davis and Moore role allocation, and the second view might be something to do with the inequality of opportunity exists between social classes, genders, or ethnicities, for instance. So that's question 3, was it question 3B? So then we've got our first 9-mark question in this paper 2. And you're going to get 3 of these as you go through. 9-mark questions are the ones that you have to write. They're like mini essays for Strat Diff. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos, I've done a few of like walkthroughs of these. How do you write a 9-mark you need? It's basically a mini essay with 2 paragraphs, right? So really short conclusion. You want 1 paragraph discussing one thing, 1 paragraph discussing another thing. You need to criticize and throw evaluation into those paragraphs to get full marks, and you want a little conclusion at the end here. So this one is asking you to discuss different sociological theories of life chances and jobs in the UK. Now, for me, the wording of this is potentially a little bit of a banana skin. And I think they've worded this a bit trickily. But what it's basically asking you is like, what do different sociological theories say about how people get jobs? So again, it's kind of similar to like that previous question. Why do certain people get the best jobs in society? I'm going to go again for 2 theoretical views on this. So I'm going to focus fundamentally on the not the Marxist view, on the functionalist view about working hard and about a meritocracy. I'm going to definitely focus here heavily on Davis and Moore's role allocation theory. So the reason why, for instance, certain people have better life chances and jobs is ultimately due to hard work and effort, meritocracy. I'm going to link that into role allocation. So people who perhaps work the hardest in particular fields, like doctors or lawyers, have to train extra specially harder because they work harder. They should get better pay for that, which will then give them better life chances, for instance. So I definitely go down the functionist route for that. You could absolutely go down the Marxist view here and talk about the ways in which you've got things like the old boys network and maintaining the class structure by the rich kind of giving jobs to the rich, those kind of things. You could bring in the correspondence principle from Bowles and Gintis here. But to be honest, I would probably talk about feminism. And I'm basically going to make this a slightly bigger version of the question that I've previously answered on that 4 marker. So I might throw in here for feminism. One of the reasons social difference life chances in jobs in the UK, I'm definitely going to talk about things like patriarchy. I'm going to talk about things like the glass ceiling. I'm probably going to mention things like men occupying the top jobs in society, women not being able to do that. I might even mention the fact that one of the reasons women can't do this is because there's still an expectation on caring and being mothers and things like that at home. So there's quite a lot you can say here. You will need to criticize each of these points, though. So for the functionist criticism, the argument is that not everybody who works hard gets the best jobs, and some people who don't work hard do very well. You can throw the Marxist criticism in there. And for the feminist view, you might talk about the fact there has been a march of progress and that women are certainly in a better position than they were, for instance, 50 years ago in terms of their life chances and their abilities to get the top jobs. So there's some ideas there you can throw down. Remember, you need 2 paragraphs and you need to evaluate within that to get anywhere close to 9 out of 9 on that. Now that's question 3 done, basically. So we're now on to question 4. And question 4, again, it's on the topic of stratification differentiation. Here we've got ourselves a little a passage or an item. So let's have a little read through this. It says, look at the following information, answer the questions that follow. Gender stereotypes in school books. An education company which produces school textbooks plans to reverse gender stereotypes in its books. This might include girls dressed as firefighters, astronauts, and playing with trucks, and boys playing in pretend kitchens or performing a dance competition. Adapted from Sky News for 2020. So, first question is, what is meant by patriarchy? You again get 1 mark for a very simple definition. So patriarchy is male domination of women or male domination of society. You then need to go one little bit further and need to give an example of patriarchy. For instance, you could talk about the glass ceiling. You could talk about the gender pay gap. You could talk about any example of prejudice and discrimination. You might even give a specific example about how, for instance, women are disadvantaged in the roles that they take on, and women have to do more at home, for instance, that dual burden idea. Okay, so with this, don't think that you can't bring in stuff that you've learned in education or families and stuff. That's kind of the whole point of StratDiff, is to like bring some of this stuff together. So patriarchy there, male domination of women, give an example, give it a bit of development. Number B, or letter B, explain one way in which male roles have changed over recent years. I mean, I think the clear thing here you want to be thinking about is going back to the family side of things and about how men perhaps are taking on more traditionally female roles. This is what we refer to as the new man. You can also talk about men not being necessarily the main breadwinner anymore, not the one who necessarily makes all the decisions. Why is that? Because we've got the new man, we've got a symmetrical family, we've had a march of progress. So anything that might refer to how men's roles at home or at work have changed would be absolutely ideal for that. Then we've got this question, explain 2 ways in which stereotypes of gender roles could be harmful. Again, I think this one is worded in a way that could potentially be a bit of a banana skin for some of you, but let's just go through some of the ways you could do this. If you want some help looking at this, go back and watch episode 16, which covers all of the issues in relation to inequalities in life chances and all that kind of stuff in terms of class, age, gender, ethnicity. So there'll be loads of stuff in episode 16. But how would I answer this one? 2 ways. I would talk firstly about media representation of women. Remember, it just mentions gender roles. So you can mention women or men here, but I'm going to talk about media representation, about how that media representation could encourage, for instance, prejudice or discrimination against particular genders. So the ways in which women or men are shown in traditional roles, like it was sort of talking about reversing in that item or that what do you call it, that passage earlier on. The second reason I might give, for instance, here might be change 2 ways in which stereotypes of gender roles could be harmful. I might talk about here about how people may use their stereotypes and their prejudices to then lead on to discrimination. So that might be in relation to thinking or assuming what men or women could or should do in terms of a job or a role they might have in society. It might be anything around the ways in which there are also limited life chances for men and women based on those prejudices and discriminations. Okay, so that is a bit of a tricky one, that one, but I would go for two very different things. Talk about the media for one, and maybe opportunities, discrimination as another reason for that. So we've got these 9 markers come around quickly, don't they? So we've got another 9 marker here. Assess whether gender differences still affect inequality in the UK today. Again, I'm going to just really quickly cover this off, but if you want a bit more of a detailed understanding of some of the themes and some of the concepts you want to bring into this, go back and have a look at episode 16, where I cover a lot of this in a lot more detail. So assess whether gender differences are still affecting inequality in the UK today. In your answer, it's advised to refer to evidence from at least 2 areas of life. Just do 2. Again, follow the same structure. We introduction, paragraph 1 on one thing, paragraph 2 another thing, we conclusion. In your paragraphs, throw in your evaluation, put your criticisms in, and that will get you very close towards 9 out of 9. So what would I write for this one? Well, obviously, I would say the answer to this is yeah, gender differences do still affect inequality in the UK today. So I'm going to go for both my paragraphs are going to be basically saying yes, they do. And the first paragraph I'm probably going to talk about would be in relation to education and work opportunities. And the second one would be in relation to families, for instance. So looking at Anne Oakley. So my first paragraph would be about one of the ways in which gender differences affect inequality in the UK is through education and work. I would look at things like the gender pay gap, issues of discrimination in work. I'd look at the glass ceiling. I might even be tempted to throw in things like the male gaze as well in terms of that. I would then maybe link that in. I'd use a statistic and I'd mention perhaps that the gender pay gap is still 15%, for instance, despite the fact that we've had changes in policy that should have made that better. So bring in that idea as well, and that will give you analysis and evaluation for that one. You could also criticize this by saying that, you know, things have got better. We have had these policies in place. My second paragraph is going to be focusing on the role of women in the home and in families. So I'm thinking here specifically of looking at Anne Oakley's concept of a dual burden. Remember, with this, I'm just going to revert back to what I know, right? I'm going to keep it simple. That is a clear way in which gender differences are unequal. We're going to talk about the family. You're going to talk about the fact that women do more around the house than men, give some examples of that stuff. And this is on the backdrop of the fact that women have changed their roles in society and now going out to work. This is what Anne Oakley then refers to as a dual burden, women doing both paid work and domestic work. This is unequal because women are doing more around the house as well. Now, if you want to throw in anything on top of that, whether it's Duncan and Marsden and their emotional work, or whether it's, I'm just looking down my list here, anything in relation to the fact, or Sylvia Walby's argument, Delphine Leonard's argument, you know, the idea is that women put in more and men benefit the most, absolutely fine. Criticize those arguments as well by, you might say, criticism for that would be that the Wilmot and Young now said this thing called the symmetrical family, where men and women's roles are basically interchangeable, they're the same thing. Use the term of the new man to justify and criticize that idea that women are still unequal at home. So both of my paragraphs are going to say, yes, gender differences affect inequality in the UK, but for the first one, it's going to be about education and work primarily, and the second one's going to be about inequalities in the home. Okay, so let's move through this. Oh gosh, I've gone way too quickly there. Let's go back up again. I do this on a really old computer. I don't know why, but it doesn't make it any easier for me. Right, so we're on to question 5 now. So 4-mark question, explain with examples what is meant by social class. So because this is a 4-mark question, you're probably going to need to mention a couple of things here. And I think for me, the things I'm going to talk about ultimately is social class is about the job you do and the occupation you have. You could then, if you want to, I would definitely go down the Marxist route for this and talk about what social class is according to Marx. So you've got the difference between the proletariat, the poor, and the bourgeoisie, the rich. You might talk about the why that is the way it is. So it's all down to about the ownership of means of production. If you are in the bourgeoisie, you'll own stuff. If you're in the proletariat, you won't. You'll just own your labour. So you can throw the Marxist route in this. I would also, given the fact we're talking about class here, I would also maybe talk about Weber and Weber's view of social class as well. Now, Weber sees a slightly different view of social class to Marx, because Marx just basically says about the job you do or what class you fall into. Weber says, yeah, it's about that, but it also depends on what he calls your market position. It's not about the amount of money you earn at the moment, it's about your potential earnings as well. So for me, with that one, explain with examples what's meant by social class, I'd go down the Marxist route. I'd also mention Weber. I'd give my examples in relation to things like work and roles that people play in society for that one. So, question 5D, describe 2 ways in which people may be exploited. My gosh, you can go down any way you want with this. So you can think about class, ethnicity, age, gender. I'm personally going to go for class and gender, I think. So the first way I'm going to talk about the way in which people might be exploited is through gender exploitation, about patriarchy, about misogyny and sexism. This might well link into prejudice and discrimination in the workplace. For example, the fact that despite we've got an Equal Pay Act and that women and men should get paid the same, that women get paid on average 15% less for doing the same job. This is what we call the gender pay gap. You might even mention the glass ceiling as well while you're there. So that's one part. The second part, well, how can people be exploited? Let's go to the Marxist argument. Let's keep it nice and simple. Marxists argue that the working class are exploited through work because they are paid less than the value of their labor that they give to produce the things that make the rich profit. So I've got 2 arguments there, a feminist argument focusing on why women are exploited and a Marxist argument focusing on why the working classes are exploited. We've got our final 9 marker to go here. So we've now got a question which asks, those living in poverty needs to change the way they live to improve their lives. Do you agree? Now, if you want to see what a brilliant answer for this looks like, go and watch my video episode 17, where I walk through this exact question. So I'm not going to spend ages and ages and ages talking about how you might do this. Ultimately, this again is a 9-mark question. You need a short introduction, you need 2 paragraphs, and you need a short conclusion. In those 2 paragraphs, you're going to focus, or I would focus, on the functionist view of poverty, which basically is the idea that, yeah, if people worked harder and improved their lives, they would get themselves out of poverty, because poverty is there because they don't work hard enough. And it also acts as a motivator for people to work harder. And then I'd give the opposite side of that, the Marxist view, which is that it doesn't matter how hard you work. The reason people live in poverty is because we've got the class differences between the rich and the poor. So you're going to talk about the fact that capitalism is the real cause of poverty, and that ultimately a system that allows the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer is ultimately going to lead to poverty. And there's nothing that people in the working class can do about that to change their lives. So the functionist view is, yeah, people can do things to improve their lives or change the way they live to improve their lives. The Marxist view is, no, they can't. You would need to criticize both of those points all the way through and then give a conclusion at the end. But as I say, if you want to watch or look at an absolutely fantastic answer, why is it fantastic? Because I wrote it. I'm joking. Go and have a look at episode number, what was it? Number 17, where I talk about the functionist and Marxist differences in relation to poverty specifically. So that's there all for you. Now, at this stage, we've actually done the hard work. We are through the majority of that paper, and we're through the stratification section. So we're through all the way through 5 sections, and 2 of those were quite straightforward. You've got the easy one at the start. You've got your data interpretation as your second section, second question, and then questions 3, 4, and 5 have all been on StratDiff. You would have already written 3 9 markers at this point if you're doing it in chronological order. So at this point, we've got to get our heads back out of StratDiff and into crime and deviance. So as you do that, let me just have a little quick drink, and we'll talk about how we would do this. So first and foremost, we've got a question here. Lovely one to start off with. Describe what is meant by the term deviance. Deviance is any behavior which breaks social norms or social expectations. You would then need to develop that. So give an example of deviance. For instance, shouting in a library or pushing in front of people in a queue, for instance. Remember, deviance isn't necessarily the same as crime. There is an overlap between crime and deviance, but what you could potentially do is talk about that a bit more in this second question, which is a 5 marker asking you to outline reasons why what is seen as deviant behavior changes in society. Now, for me, this is a lovely question. Why is it a lovely question? Because it's a 5 marker, which means you need to basically put down 1 paragraph, like one big block of text, not big block, but a block of text, no intro, no conclusion, no evaluation needed, anything like that. Just whack down some reasons. Now, for me, I think if you go back and watch my video 18, where I do kind of the key terms in crime and deviance, I cover off why deviant behavior changes and why ultimately deviance can be seen as a social construction, which is what this question is asking. So in my paragraph for this, I'm going to mention probably 3 things, but I'm going to mention them in quite short amount of detail because it's only a 5 mark question. So one way that deviant behavior changes in society is due to what we call situational deviance. What is seen as deviant in one situation will not be seen as deviant in another. The example I always give is two different situations, a library and a football match. Think about the behaviors that are seen as deviant. In a library, if you are shouting, that's very much deviant. In a football stadium, that is not deviant at all. Situational deviance, one example. Historical deviance, another example. If we look back in history, things that today are crimes or seen as deviant, never used to be, and vice versa. I'll give you one example. Homosexuality was a criminal offence up until 1967 in Britain. Therefore, we don't see homosexuality as deviant anymore. It's an example of historical deviance. And the final example I'm going to throw down is cross-cultural deviance. So the ways in which across the world, what is seen as deviant in one culture may not be seen as deviant in another. You can give any example you like. You might just want to give the classic one of in Britain, it is illegal to smoke cannabis, whereas in various parts of the world, including several states in America, it is completely legal and free, and you can go and buy it in shops. So there you go. 3 examples: historical, situational, and cross-cultural. That will get you through that question easy enough. We've then got an 8 marker. Explain how age and crime are linked. Now, again, if you are worried about how you answer this question, it's easy. Just go back and watch my previous video, which looks at patterns of crime concerning age, class, gender, and ethnicity. And I answer this question brilliantly, if I do say so myself. So I'm not going to wax lyrical about this right here. Go back and look at episode 21. Go right to the end of the video. You'll get a walkthrough of how you can do this. And I've written the answer for an 8 out of 8. But very, very briefly, why are age and crime linked? Due to the age crime curve. It shows us that basically, if you are late in your teenage years or late 20s, that's the age that you're most likely to commit crime. Give me 2 reasons that might explain this. You are going to go down, for instance, something like, let's talk about young people are more likely to be labelled and stereotyped due to what they do and their behaviours. As a result, this may well lead to police or even just members of the public considering them to be committing crime or perhaps labelling them as criminals when they're not, so to speak. You could even tie this into the fact that there's the new right argument of lower socialization of young children, specifically those from lone parent families. Or the other answer I would definitely give here is make it nice and easy for yourself. Talk about subcultures. Why subcultures? Because subcultures tend to be made up of young people. So just throw that down, link into people like Albert Cohen or Stan Cohen, give some of those key terms, whether it's relative deprivation or whether it's media representation and folk devils, more panics, whatever you like. Tie those 2 ways to age. As long as you're showing really clearly that you're linking them to age, you're going to do really well. So again, my 2 kind of points for that would be labeling and stereotyping of young people, and then the second one would be subcultures and linking that into potentially media representation of young people as well. So that's your 8 marker. We've got one fat 15 marker to go. And this is going to be the biggest question you answer on this paper, which is why for a lot of my students, I say to them, have a look at this first. At the very least, go and have a look at this. Try and whack down some ideas, first of all. As you're going back over the paper, if you don't want to write it straight away, get back over the paper and you'll know what's coming up. It might even bring some things into the front of your mind as you're going through it. So what's beautiful about this is I've just written a paragraph about subcultures. I'm going to just recycle it for this one because the question is discuss why subcultures and crime are related. Now, there are lots of reasons why crime and subcultures are related. And for this question, you're going to need to follow that format of a 15-mark essay, which is a short introduction. You're going to need to give 3 paragraphs on 3 different things. One of those paragraphs needs to be on subcultures because that's what's mentioned in the question. And with each of those paragraphs, you'll need to criticize your ideas within those paragraphs and finish off with a short conclusion. So ultimately, my introduction for this would be something along the lines of, yes, crime and subcultures are related, but they're not the only reason why crime happens. I actually, for this one, will probably go down and give 2 paragraphs on subcultural theories. I'm going to focus my first one on the views of Albert Cohen, who says that young people experience marginalization and status frustration. And as a result of this, they turn to subcultures to improve their levels of status by inverting social norms and therefore getting status through committing crimes that invert those social norms. So, for example, a social norm is to respect property. A subculture may turn that on its head and say, don't respect property, commit as much vandalism as you can, and that will increase your status. I'm going to need to cover that off with a criticism. I'll probably mention something along the lines of the fact that, you know, it's only really certain types of people that fall into subcultures. And if we follow Cohen's arguments, it's young, working class males, basically. So while subcultural theory from Cohen can explain that, it doesn't by any means explain all types of crime. The second argument I'm going to throw down is that of Stan Cohen. And Stan Cohen talked about the link between subcultures and crime fundamentally due to the media representation of the two youth groups that he studied, which were the mods and rockers, which became seen as folk devils in the media due to the moral panic that was created because of the media sensationalizing their reporting of the behaviors of the mods and rockers, and as a result, creating an amplification of deviance. I'm going to write a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about how, according to Stan Cohen, the big thing here is not about the act itself of the deviance, it's about the media representation, which makes it seem bigger and worse than it is. I'm then going to criticize that. One of the criticisms you can throw down for this is, I suppose, the fact that not everybody, Cohen was working in the late 1970s, and I suppose his study was focused on newspapers. One of my criticisms of this would be that most people don't read newspapers anymore, and that people actually get their news and media from other sources. Do newspapers really have the power to create a moral panic anymore these days? That'd be my criticism. Last paragraph can be any other view on why crime and subcultures aren't related. So I'm just going to go down a Marxist route and say that there's one argument that suggests that subcultures and crime aren't related is due to the fact that Marxists focus on the issue of class, not necessarily groups of young people with their own norms and values. In this, I'm going to throw down some ideas about William Chambliss and about differential enforcement of the law, and about ultimately how the working class are easier targets for the agents of social control, like the police, to pick up on, because the crimes they commit tend to be a lot more visible, as opposed to the crimes of the middle class, they're white collar crimes, which tend to be harder to detect and they're therefore harder to catch. I'm going to finish this all off with a conclusion that's basically going to sum up and say, yes, there is a link between subcultures and crime, but it by no means explains why all crime happens. Subcultures and subcultural theory tend to only focus on specific types of crimes like violent gangs or drug offences, and those offences tend only to be committed by young working class males, for instance. There we go. There's our answer to our 15-mark essay. So once we've got through that, you'd think, oh, great, I've done it. They've thrown this 15-mark question in, I'm through. No, unfortunately not. You've got the last little bit to do, which is called applied methods. So you have to bring back your methods knowledge into this. And this one is a little bit different to what I call straight methods in paper one, because you need to be able to know about different sociological research methods and apply them to a particular situation. And this situation in this paper from last year was about investigating school children's views on vaping. So question A asks you to identify one research method that would be suitable for your research into school children's views on vaping. You can give any explanation, any method you want, but there's a couple of things to be aware of here. One or two of these methods that you know of won't work for this, because you're looking at kids' views on vaping. So the only answers really you can give down here would be a questionnaire, a structured interview, a group interview, or an unstructured interview. Observation would probably not get you any marks, because you're looking at people's views, not their behavior. So just be aware of that with this question. Now, the other thing you want to be aware of is the answer you give for question A, your method, you're going to need to talk about that in more detail in question B and question C as well. So question B says, the 2 reasons why the method you've chosen is suitable for looking at school children's views on vaping. So let's say you've thrown down a questionnaire. You're going to give reasons like, for instance, questionnaires are anonymous, so kids might feel a little bit more comfortable about giving their views on vaping. You might also throw down the reason that questionnaires tend to be very reliable, which means that if you want to repeat this research again at another time, next year, for instance, you could do that, and you can compare the data set from one year to another, and that allows you to start looking at patterns and trends, for instance. The other thing I suppose you could mention as well is that the questionnaires are cheap, quick, and easy to do, but there are better reasons than those practical reasons. Okay, but you've got to give 2 of them. And then the last one you've got here is explain. Oh, blimey, sorry, I have completely, I'd have lost marks for that. And the reason I lost marks for that one, I'm going to go back here, describe 2 reasons why the method you chose is suitable for research and vaping. You have to link in your reasons specifically to vaping. So your arguments might be, one reason would be the questionnaires are anonymous. This might make young people more likely to express their views clearly and truthfully on vaping. You have to mention vaping or school children in each of those answers. The second one I said was about reliability. So a second reason is that questionnaires are reliable, which means if you want to repeat the research on skilled children's views into vaping. You can do this next year and then establish patterns and trends. So you have to mention the topic, which in this case is vaping, or the sample, which is school children. Sorry, nearly forgot that. And then the same kind of vibe with this one. So question 6C, explain and evaluate the problems you may experience when researching school children's attitudes to vaping. Again, what you want to be thinking about here is your practical, ethical, and potentially theoretical issues that might exist with looking at school children's views on vaping. So with our practical issues, we've got things like access. How are you going to actually get to speak to these young people? Are you going to need to go through a gatekeeper? Do you need permission to speak to them? Is there going to be cost and time implications? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Our ethical reasons, we're thinking here, we're speaking to school children, we're going to need to get informed consent from their parents. Maybe their parents might not want them to take part in this research, particularly if they're very young. They might be impressionable. We don't want to put ideas into kids' heads, for instance. So there's a danger there, even a danger of harm that we might convince or encourage kids to get involved in vaping. The other problems are you want to think about, your problems want to be thinking about how do you actually get funded to do this? So how much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay for this research? Is it the case that maybe that you might be able to get around those funding issues if this was funded by someone who's got an interest in this research, maybe a health charity, the NHS, or even schools who are looking to reduce vaping in schools? So with this one, the structure of this, really, you can either focus on 2 issues in a bit of detail or 3 in a bit more detail. I've just rocked out like 3 issues there. I'd give like a couple of treat this as almost like a triple 3-mark question, triple 2-mark question. Give your thing, your problem, develop it, give your problem, develop it, give your problem, develop it, and that will get you through to the marks that you need. I would definitely recommend evaluating those problems as well. So thinking about if you've got ethical issues, how might you get around that, for instance? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the paper. So we're all good. You get some extra sheets and stuff at the end there, but you shouldn't need to use them. If you obviously need any more paper than that, then put your hand up, ask one of the invigilators who's walking around, and see if you can get yourself some extra marks done. So that's it. That's me done. I just wanted to sort of put a bit of a hello and a thank you out there to anyone who's watched these videos. I'm going to have a little bit of a break now from these because I've just been absolutely going ham on these the last few weeks. So I've actually done about 22 videos. So all of paper 1's covered. I know if you're watching this when I'm recording it, which is in May 2023, paper 1's been, it's gone, don't worry about it. Paper 2 is the one you're probably all looking at now. Anything that I've got which has got a black background on it on my videos, they are the ones you want to be looking at for paper 2. Everything on StratDiff's covered, everything on crime's covered. I'm pretty damn confident that if you watched all of those videos, I've basically covered the entire GCSE Eduqas sociology specification. So that's me and my nothing going on in my life story, because I've been able to do that over the last few weeks. Anyways, hope this has all been helpful for you. If it has, awesome. Drop me a like, share this, subscribe to it, all of that kind of jazz. Tell someone else you know does sociology. If you found it useful, they probably will do as well. If you need anything, got any questions, whack them in the comments to this video. I will get back to you. I will keep an eye on the comments, particularly up until the date of the second exam as well. So just give us a shout if you need anything. Otherwise, you can catch me on all of the socials, so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and that, whatever. You can actually go and listen to my podcast. That's available on Spotify and, of course, on Apple Music or Apple, whatever they call it these days, Apple Podcasts. So go and check us out. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to leave you to it. The absolute very best of luck for all your exams. Thank you very much for watching. As I say, if you need anything, just drop me a line. Otherwise, folks, peace out. I'll see you in a bit. Bye.